Yeah, all these games suck for the same reason, and I happen to be a gamer with standards. So before I'm gonna talk about why these games suck, I'm gonna go play online multiplayer Ratchet & Clank All for One on this used copy I just bought. Oh, god damn it! Activate your Ratchet & Clank All for One online pass to access online features? I thought you were better than that. Well, I guess it's just one more chapter of the story of the online pass epidemic of the 2010s. This was an interesting couple of years there. It primarily happened from 2011 to 2013, and mostly it was done by the publishers EA, Ubisoft, and Sony. It was a funny little tactic these publishers employ to try to combat used game sales. Feels like these game companies always have something they're trying to go against. You know, they probably just realized like, oh, wait a second, trading in your games and buying used games is such a big part of the video game industry. And guess what? They don't make any money from that. Aside from the fact that like one person had to buy the game new and then they sold it. So they at least made one sale there. Good for you. But I mean, it kind of makes sense that these publishers would try to find more of an incentive for people to buy new games, because fundamentally, there's no real difference buying a new game compared to a used one, outside you not wanting the game's case to be a little crusty. Nowadays, the main tactic is kind of the day one editions. A lot of games you buy nowadays will have a banner right on the front telling you, hey, you are top dog shit. Most of the time, they just throw in some basic little cosmetics and whatnot, nothing that crazy. And another way publishers combat used game sales is how a lot of new games just don't drop in price anymore. Sony definitely figured that out. Back during the PS3 and PS4 days, they would drop the prices of a ton of their games like within a couple of months of their release. But now you look at games that release within the first year or two of the PS5's lifespan, and they're still full damn price. And more often than not, if the new price doesn't go down, then the used price doesn't really go down that much further. So most of the time, for me personally, if it's to the point where, oh yeah, the new version of this game is $70, and the used one is like 60, 65, I'm just kind of thinking, I might as well get the new one, and you know, it's a nice, pretty, fresh copy. But that doesn't mean used games don't have a purpose. I mean, we need used games. In fact, I think these companies benefit so much more from used games than they think they do just looking at the statistics. Because these companies definitely looked at used games as like a threat to their profit margins. And in the short term, sure, but long term, I think you need to have used games as a way to get games cheaper, because hey, what if you're not sure if you're going to like a game? If The Last of Us came out back in the day at $60 and you weren't 100% sold on it, you could pick up the used copy for far cheaper, so it's far less of a risk. Or hell, you could rent the game. Remember renting the game, kids? But if that all goes well and you end up really loving the game, in the future, you're far more likely to buy the sequel to the game brand new, or new merchandise, or be there day one to support whatever else these companies put out. And quite frankly, I think it's so damn stupid that these companies were getting so afraid of used game sales when pretty much every other industry has a secondhand market and you don't see them freaking out about it. Furniture companies aren't going, damn, we gotta stop people from buying our furniture secondhand. But either way, this idea came to fruition around the late 2000s, early 2010s, and it was the online pass. Now, what did that mean? Well, with every new copy of the game, you would get a voucher on the inside. This voucher wasn't giving you anything special other than the ability to play online multiplayer. Enter the above code to activate the online pass to access online play. That's all it did. And this is a one-time code, meaning if you bought the game new, you get this, no problem. But then if you sell the game and then somebody else picks it up secondhand and this online pass was already redeemed, if they'd want to play Battlefield 3 online, they would have to pay an extra $10 to do so. Now, was this the worst thing in the world? No, but it was one of the most annoying, especially considering on the Xbox 360, back then, the 360 required you to pay for Xbox Live Gold in order to access online multiplayer. So on Xbox 360, it didn't matter you were already paying for the privilege to play online multiplayer. You still had to pay for the privilege to play online multiplayer in a game like Battlefield 3 if you bought the game used. But sometimes this went beyond just simple online multiplayer. In Batman Arkham City, the entire Catwoman portion of the game was locked behind the Batman Arkham City pass. So damn, it's like even single player games were affected. But I found this to be even more unacceptable for a lot of games that were heavily marketed as multiplayer experiences. God of War Ascension's big hook was the fact that it was multiplayer God of War. You could play God of War multiplayer and it was all online. But of course, it does have an online pass. So this big element of the game, like its main new gimmick, if you didn't buy this game brand new, well, you gotta pay up to experience it. But on top of that, even if you did buy the game new, and let's say it was just like an older copy, the online pass expired after a year and a half. Same with something like Ratchet and Clank All for One. Kind of the big thing about this game was that it was a 4-player co-op game. And this sucks just even more because this is a game for kids. Like, this is definitely a family game. You know, you play co-op with your family. Of course, most of the time your family is going to be kind of all in the same room, but kids play online multiplayer all the time, and you're going to maybe lock them out of that to maybe squeeze an extra $10 out of somebody. Suffice to say, this whole practice was quite unpopular. I mean, to be fair, let's say you bought this copy of Battlefield 3 at a used game store for like $10. So, okay, maybe a $10 online pass. That's nothing all too crazy. I mean, then you're only spending $20 for the game as opposed to $60, so you're still making out like a bandit right there. But what if you only bought this game used to play multiplayer? What if you didn't give a damn about the single player campaign? What if you still bought a game new and then you open it up and the code is fucking expired? What about the fact that you already pay for online multiplayer with Xbox Live Gold? I think in the end, this caused way more problems than it really solved. Because like I said, I think having used games as an option is overall a good and healthy thing for the industry. Yeah, these companies initially saw it as like an immediate loss of profit, but in the long term, I think that creates a far greater, healthier community of fans. And what these online passes were doing were pretty much acting like if you were buying used games, you were doing something wrong, locking out oftentimes what ended up being a very big part of a lot of these games' experiences. Now listen, I'm not like a huge fan of like day one editions and whatnot, but at the very least, like, okay, if you want to incentivize consumers to buy new games, yeah, throw in just some bullshit random costume, who cares? That's much better than locking out significant modes, especially if you're a multiplayer fighting game, a multiplayer first-person shooter, a God of War, Ratchet and Clank game where multiplayer is seen as like one of the biggest new additions. Now this war against used games kinda hit a peak when the Xbox One was revealed in the spring of 2013, because now we have a flat-out console that's trying to stop you from playing used games. That was a situation where, no, they're not just locking out a mode if you buy a game used. No, they're locking out the entire game if you buy it used. The Xbox One initially could not play used games. And then Sony got out on stage at E3 2013 making a huge deal about how the PS4 will support used games and how they love used games. They even showed that little goofy skit of them sharing games on PS4. But I honestly forgot about a lot of this online pass controversy back then. And I just find it to be ironic that Sony changed their tune so quickly when they saw how much it was biting Microsoft in the ass. But then you look at what they were doing that exact same month. The Last of Us launched in June of 2013, and it had an online pass. So it is pretty funny that they were kind of acting like, oh yeah, don't worry, we love used games here at Sony. When in reality, they were still in the thick of it trying to figure out how to stop you from buying used games as much as possible. But as it turns out, I think that moment was what got them to realize that, you know what? Having used games as an option overall benefits everybody. I mean, you probably want a good relationship with GameStop since that's like the only major video game retailer in the United States. You want a good relationship with your consumer. You want to make sure they know they have options. And you know, if they really wanted to kill used games, I think looking forward to an all digital future, that was gonna do it much easier than doing this kind of dumb nonsense. Because in the end, I think these companies kind of got what they wanted. As the years went on, more and more people started transitioning to digital-only purchases on the game consoles. And you know, a digital purchase is honestly even better for these companies than buying the games new from a retailer, because they retain so much more profit from a digital purchase than some new purchase from Walmart. In addition, in 2013, moving over to the PS4, Sony started to require customers pay for PlayStation Plus in order to play online multiplayer. Thus, with the PS4, Sony actually made it a requirement that games cannot have online passes like this. They not only stopped doing it themselves, but they made sure that other companies didn't do it on their platform. And now EA and Ubisoft announced they would not be continuing the online pass situation, pretty much admitting that it wasn't really doing what they thought it would do. It wasn't deterring people from used game sales. All it was doing was annoying the shit out of everybody. Looking back, it is really interesting to see what battles a lot of these game companies were trying to fight. You know, and quite frankly, a lot of it just seems like they kind of sit in a boardroom meeting, kind of twiddling their thumbs, kind of figuring out like, what is a problem we should be having right now? And then they go, well, used games, obviously, that's a huge problem. Well, let's figure something out. And then this is what they figured out, and it's kind of like one of the bigger slaps in the faces a consumer could get. Because this doesn't benefit consumers. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but it's most definitely just kind of like, yeah, what the f***? But while the online pass lost in the end, I think these companies kind of started to get what they wanted with the rise of digital kind of overtaking everything. So to the guy whose idea was to put an online pass in Dead Space 3, you might have been laughed at the time, but 10 plus years later, congratulations. You won, you son of a bitch.